think I explained this the last time, when you do have 4 basic sections, you have the ability to break down your designs in a much smaller fashion, meaning you only have to design this small area of the head and then this area of the head. And then what you can do is you can go into designing or copying it on the other side, because most of our haircuts are done in a symmetrical fashion. Not all of them are symmetrical, but if your design is going to be the same on one side and the other, you're going to be matching both sides. So we're going to take a diagonal back section, and when we do this, we want to make you aware that the sections you take should always be parallel to your guidelines. I'm going to try and leave as much length as I can in this haircut, and as I said, we're going to do one length starting with a 1 length perimeter, and I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to run my fingers parallel to my partings up here, and I'm going to leave as much length as I possibly can. And we're going to then just cut our design line down here. Now, we're going to do the same thing on the opposite side, so I'm going to take this, bring it over here for you, following the same concept. And one of the reasons why I'm doing both one side then the other is so that I can get balance before I decide to go into my design in the front. Even though my design is going to be a slide cutting design around the face in the front, you're going to still see me cutting this diagonal back line into my side before I actually go into cutting the slide cut. Using my point in which I stopped cutting, I'm going to now cut my line exactly like I did on the other side. And one of the things that I used to use as a young hairdresser is, if you're concerned about getting too short on this side, what you could do is actually, like I'm doing here for you, I'm actually cutting it slightly longer than the opposite side. So I can now check my lengths and come in and take a tiny, tiny bit more off. Again, just a safety feature that helps when you are a young hairdresser and you're unsure if they're not going to be even. Now, again, the idea of having safety features and things like that in your haircuts only come from experience, and my experience was every time I cut one side and I went to cut the other side that I cut the second time was too short. And then it taught me, say, okay, let me make it a little bit longer on that side and take a little bit more off on that side. So that's how I came up with that. The idea of sharing all of these ideas and all of these haircuts and things came from an idea of mine to sort of chronological, or how do you say it? Archive. Very good, thank you. Archive all of these things that I've learned over my career, which has spanned over 34 years, and just make sure that the individuals who get to watch these videos will be able to take these points with them and become better hairdressers. So we created a video library on our YouTube page called How to Be a Great Freaking Hairdresser, and that's how it all started. So I'm just following the guideline I see underneath here. Diagonal back, we call this. You can call it whatever you want. And that's another thing that I want to make you guys aware of. Don't get hung up on terminology. Don't get hung up on what they call things. Just visually see what is being taught and compare it to what your knowledge or what your education created for you or called it for you, and just relate it to that. So now you see me working into the front area of this haircut. And again, watching as I work that I've combined the front with the back, and we're doing a one line, one design. And it doesn't matter how perfect my front is, because, well, it does matter, I'm sorry. What happens is they do have to match, because when I come to slide cut the sides, which we're going to do in just a little bit, I have to make sure the length here and the length here are equal so that we wind up with an even haircut. Whenever you slide cut, you never take off the length. you create the length from wherever length you start, but you do have to make sure that the length at the bottom stays the way it should. So we're going to come over to this other side, and you can see I'm using one length. How do I know we're using one length? Well, what I'm doing is I'm following, and this comb has a notch in it. And what I'm doing is I'm following the guideline from underneath. And working up towards the front. Again, if you're concerned about being too long, what I'm doing now is I'm actually not even going up anymore. I'm cutting it horizontally just to show you a point where you'll see when you look at this mannequin, that side is purposely made longer than this side. You see how I did that? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back. I saw how much has to come off. I'll adjust my length and take a little bit more of that off till I'm even. This way, it's safe to say, and this is not always, we all make mistakes, that's how we learn and that's how we grow, is that you're going to learn how to do these different things, but sometimes they don't always work out. Now, if this was, again, if I accidentally came on this side, and I went, oops, which you never say in front of your customers, and I accidentally made this side too short, I would just work onto the other side in my salon and go cut this side shorter without mentioning anything to them. So that's how we do it in the world of hairdressing, although a lot of hairdressers like to say, oh, I never make a mistake, which is a lot of bull because they do make mistakes. They just hide them very well, which I did many times. So we're going to just take this all down now, and we're going to just finish up by taking 2 more sections, bringing it on down, and then we're going to go into our front to design the fringe for you. I'll do this side real quick. One of the things about this diagonal back, it's one of the very first haircuts our freshmen do in our school. And again, I think it's important for them, and well as everyone else, to see how the foundation of your education or the foundation of haircutting plays a part in today's modern world. In fact, everything, whether it be a haircut or a long hair design or a hair color, you know, they're all based on foundation of your education. And the foundation of your education is imperative for you to be able to go in and do the high fashion things that you all see online from all these hairdressers and all these wonderful techniques and all these wonderful designs. The idea though is until you are good and strong in the foundation of your hair cutting or hair coloring or hair styling, you will not have the ability to create or be as creative as you wish because you're not sure how to make what your vision is. So we're just coming in here and knocking this off. And we should be okay here because I did check the lengths earlier. And now we're going to drop the rest. So we're just going to follow through on this, take it down. Whenever you're doing your perimeter and you're doing your last section, it's important, or one of the points I'd like to bring out for you is if you see, I'm combing with the large teeth of my comb. And what I want to do is, even though the hair is wet and I can't truly find natural fall, I want the hair to flow around the surface of this head as best I can. So I want it to naturally fall here rather than me going down and cutting this line down here, which really nothing else is reaching. I don't want to accidentally pull this hair over here to be cut on my one length, because that's not where the hair wants to live. The hair wants to be around the head where the hair wants to be. And of course, the only way to truly find that is if it was dry, but we'll do it as best we can while it's wet. So I'm using the large teeth of my comb, just following that line from underneath and just continuing it. Now again, I'm going to just knock this front off because I'm going to be creating a fringe for you in just a moment. But I do go follow through my haircuts to make sure I don't get lost in them. I do want to check to make sure that if anything comes over my baseline or my one length perimeter at this point, it comes off. Okay. Good enough. So, comes to our second part of our haircut, which is our fringe area. We mentioned the other day about a fringe, and if you want to make it wider or you want to make it narrower. The whole idea of this haircut is to create a very strong and heavy fringe, and that's going to be the heaviest part of this haircut, and the rest is going to sweep away from the hair and be much lighter. So we're going to create a fringe that's going to go about to the corner or the top part of the head, the highest point of the head. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a measurement here. I'm going to go right to the corner of the eyebrow here. And that's about where I want my fringe to be. I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to do the same thing. And when you're doing this fringe, it is going to take a little bit of making sure that the sectioning and where you pull the hair is balanced so that it's even on both sides. If you're ever unsure of your sections, you could see what I'm doing here. I'm checking with my comb to make sure that I'm hitting the face or the area around the anatomy in the same spot. So I want a concave fringe, and we're going to do this all in one shot. As I mentioned, I'm going to take this fringe, I'm going to be pinching it into the center. So what we're doing is, again, another law of haircutting is that shifting creates distance, which creates length. So now here's an example of us shifting this hair into the center of this mannequin so that it will actually become longer, because this hair has to travel farther than this, and this hair has to travel farther. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to pinch it and we're going to cut it right at the center of the bridge of the nose. So I'm first making sure that the distribution, the hair combed here into my fingers, matches this hair here, and then one more time down the center to make sure she's combed nice and smoothly. Pinch. I'm happy with what I see here, where I see the hair traveling. And we're going to again go to the bridge of the nose, and all of that's going to come off. And as you see me closing my scissors, I'm pulling away. And the reason why is if I'm pushing in with my scissors as I close, I'm pushing the hair. For me to get a good solid straight line there, as I close my scissors, I should slowly pull away. And again, that's going to give you a straighter line like we got here. Now, once we do that, obviously, if the client wants it shorter, we can make it shorter. If we want it longer, we make it longer. But this is going to create a nice concave fringe for us. And you could see that that hits her down at the corner of the eye here, and on this side, down at the corner of the eye. So that's a concave fringe. And now what I need to do to complete the perimeter of this haircut is I need to slide cut, and I don't have to connect it to the fringe. I'm actually going to drop it a little bit here, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And what we're going to do is we're going to slide cut this front off to blend from here to here. It is very, very difficult to go from short to long with cutting on a blunt cut. Now, if you guys wanted to do that, there is a way to do it, and I'll show you here, but I'm not going to actually cut it. we would have to bring this hair forward and drag this hair and angle our hands way out here. But remember, I have to match or get down all the way to here. So I would have to do this in steps, cutting a steep angle. I might even come all the way across on an angle like this to try and achieve matching or connecting point A to point B. A lot of work, and by shifting all of that hair across, we're going to wind up with graduation and not one length. Okay, so when we talk about doing the slide cutting, much quicker way. And again, just to bring the point out that I showed you guys the other day, I believe I did, I'm not sure, but in our videos I know it is. I always make sure that when I do my slide cutting, my section on the side never goes behind the ear. Even though I want this haircut to flow back, I want the slide cut to stay at her shoulder and not to go behind her shoulder, okay? So I'm going to do that. Right now, we're going to connect from the cheekbone right down to our length down here. Always make sure that you have the hair in your fingers. You're putting your fingers pointing to wherever you want to start. You're going to open your scissors slightly, catch the hair, and pull down with the scissors as you come to the length. Okay? And I'm going to just check that to make sure that we've gotten it all the way down. And I could see how much of the side I've left as far as the weight on the side. I could actually take more and bring that slide cut right to this corner, but I never want to take that corner off, because if I take the length off on my slide, I now no longer connect to my back. And then I'm going to have a step in my side into my back. So we're going to now move to the other side. And by the way, for a right-handed person, this is the easy side. And then, of course, the opposite side is the hard side. So what I used to do before my buddy over in England taught me a new way of doing it was I used to come in, hold my fingers where I wanted it, try and get my scissors behind my hand like this and pull down and try and make this side balanced with that side. Very difficult, very awkward for a body position and things, as you can see. So I was always looking for an alternative. And my friend Keith Cooper, who we're still in touch with, he owns the Keith Francis chain of salons in England, taught me a way of doing the technique much easier. He said, lower the hydraulic chair as low as it will go for you. He said, step behind the client. He said, take your arm and place it over the top. Make sure that when you go to do this slide cut, so as you can see, what I'm doing before I start is I'm making sure that that side section, again, just like on the opposite side, always matches, or that side part should always come to where the ear connects to the face, never behind the ear or to the center of the ear, because again, what we're trying to do is keep this hair slide cut in front of the shoulder. Now in this particular haircut, it's not as important because remember, we did a diagonal back haircut. We want this hair to flow back. But again, I don't want to lose the length that I've created in the back. So if we're doing a square haircut, which we did last week, I believe it was, through the back, it is really important because we want that hair to push forward. But now what we want to do is we're actually going to have this haircut flow back. So it's not as important, but I still am going to follow my process and make sure that when I take my side parting, that ear is going to, that side section is going to go right to where the ear connects to the face. And she's getting a little dry, and if you want to cause pain to your client, slide cut on dry hair. That'll really put a tear in her eye. But if you don't want to make your client cry, make sure the hair is good and wet so that the scissors slide down for her or him. This way, it gives the opportunity for the scissors, no matter how sharp they are, to flow. Now again, we want to try and create the same starting point, which we started with on the other side. And I do remember that we did do the cheekbone. So on this side, again, notice the body position is standing behind the client. We're coming over with our cutting hand, whether it be, if you were a lefty, you'd be doing this on the opposite side. We're going to start right at our cheekbone, make sure there's no knots in that hair. And what we're going to do is we're going to start our slide cut from this point, coming down, and again, trying to keep the amount of hair at the bottom what I left on the other side. So how much hair is left here, again, I did on the other side. So I'm trying to keep that as balanced as possible, but I also want to check to see where my starting point is. And I think it's a little lower on, a little higher on this side. So I'm going to just take the beginning of this a little bit more. Okay. Check balance before you move on. I'm going to raise her up a little bit. And you could see that slight drop from the fringe area where our starting point is. And what we're going to now do is we're going to be ready to go into our layers. And I believe in a lot of young hairdressers should make sure they understand. It is easier when you are trying to design a haircut to think of it in two different fashions. One, the perimeter cut or the perimeter design. And that's what I just did for you guys. I did it by cutting a diagonal back in the back, fringe with a concave fringe, and a slide cut. I could have used many different ways to create that concave fringe. I could have, rather than slid cut, I could have used a razor. It doesn't matter what tool you use. Don't become mono-tooled. In the back here, I could have done something else. But the idea is, think of the hair design that you have to create, because a lot of times students will say, well, how do I know when to do this? Or how do I know when to do that? And I was one of those young individuals too when I was starting out. And the idea here is, think of the haircut as an exterior design, something you created for the perimeter, and then think about the interior and what you're going to design for the interior of the haircut. So, as we're ready to move into our interior, I'm going to go back to my 4 basic sections, and I'm not worried about going to the front of the ear anymore because I'm done with my slide cut. So what I'm going to do is, with my layering, I'm going to take my 4 basic sections. And one of the things that a lot of times we need to know is, depending on what type of subsectioning we are taking, okay, will determine what we're doing. But always, 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 I will always return to where the 4 basic sections meet. And the reason being is that when we do this haircut, I many times will be using distribution from that to make my subsections to create my interior cut. In this case, it's going to be layers, and what we're going to do is we're going to use this point when we get to the back layers using radial sectioning. Okay, so that's why I break it back to the 4 basic sections. Now, as I said, this haircut could be done with many different types of subsections, but if you remember your laws of haircutting, the laws of haircutting say, if I was to go in and I do this haircut and I'm doing it on a horizontal section, it's going to be stronger, heavier, and a more masculine haircut. If we do vertical sectioning in this haircut, we get lighter area or more moving haircut. Now, because I want that fringe to be solid and heavy, and I want the rest of the haircut to be light and airy, I am going to create this using vertical sections. The other thing that I'm going to be doing for you is I'm going to be creating a short area in the front to a longer area in the back. So the design is meant to go short to long, and that's because of the laws of hair cutting, which say short hair pushes and supports long hair. Which way do I want this haircut to go? I want this haircut to go away from the face. That's why I created that perimeter design the way I did, and that's why I'm going to create my layers the way I'm going to do it for you now. The technique that we're going to use is going to be slide layering. Slide layering, you have to have obviously a sharp pair of scissors, and we do make sure that the hair is wet. And if you're wondering why sliding or slide cutting, it's because it's sort of an in-between a razor cut and a haircut. It's a texture that you create with sliding that is different than a blunt cut, which you just close the scissors, and when you do a razor where you're chopping more. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a center section right down from the fringe area all the way into the back of the haircut. So we're going right from the front to the back. And what we're going to do is we're going to go from our fringe area, which you could see is longer towards the back and shorter towards the front. And we're going to actually create our slide layering into that. And we're going to be putting our elbow up and pushing our scissors through. As you could see, that's not a perfect line. But if I wanted a perfect line, I would do a blunt cut. Bringing the hair up from the back, pushing the scissors through, making sure that all of the hair from the bottom comes up to my line. Anything that comes over that line gets cut off, and as you could see, there is a large percentage of hair that's left down here. And that's where we talked about the weight over there and how we're going to go and attack that later on, but we are going to do that on dry hair. It's a great technique that I learned a long time ago, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And it'll be explained to you on the board before we actually go in and do it when we switch the mannequins. But in the interim, what we're going to do now is I'm going to be using that guideline through the back. And what we're going to do is we are going to come in and use pie sections through the back area here. Starting it with our guideline. Always taking a piece of our guide. And while I was doing this haircut yesterday on the pre-done mannequin, I realized that this particular haircut has what we call a traveling guide versus a stationary guide. When we did the conversion layering a week ago, we pulled everything to a stationary guideline, which was here, 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 and here. And everything traveled to it. So the guideline stayed in that position. Whereas here, we're taking pieces of our guideline and we're making it travel with us. And there's a big difference between that. So when we do that, you need to know how to work with a stationary guide and a traveling guide. Traveling guide's a little bit trickier, because you always want to make sure that the amount of hair you have in your hands does not get too wide. And we always want to make sure that when we go to cut the hair, we are in between our two sections we take. And that is the section that contains some of the previous guide and, of course, some of the new guide right here. And again, we don't want to accidentally take this haircut, pulling it forward, because that would make the guideline travel farther, which would create length. Nor do we want to pull it this way, which we would create length as well on the opposite side, making that hair travel this way. So we want to be in between our two sections. We want to be straight up from our guide, from our point, and you can see why I went back to the 4 basic sections, is so that I can keep that point. These mannequins, unfortunately, don't have a lot of hair on them. A lot of it's staying. But again, finding that guideline, and if there's nothing there to cut, don't cut it. Taking a new section of hair, removing the guideline we've already cut, keeping clean sectioning. Some of the very basic things that we teach is that the better your sections, the cleaner your sections, the better your scissor stroke, the better a haircut will become. Going to take the last section here because we are going to do something a little different on the sides. And I'll explain that in a moment. Taking that last piece of guideline, bringing that hair up. Seeing if anything, just these small strands of hair coming off. And that's it for that side. We'll come to do the other side now for you. And I'll try and speed this up. If you see here, I drew the top view of the mannequin. So we're looking at the top here. And what we're doing is we've just cut our layers through the back area here. Okay, and of course we did a concave upward, shorter to longer. Now, to keep with the idea of the hair getting shorter in the front to longer in the back, every section I take through the front area of this haircut is going to be starting at the front, creating the length I want. We are then going to take each of the individual hair sections for the layers from where I want the length in the front and making them the drag or travel forward to this point. By doing that, the layers, because they have to travel forward, are getting longer as they go back. So the layering will come out wider here and wider here. And they will connect to the back layers. If they don't, I will just continue taking the sections or the layers in the back and dragging them forward to make sure that they blend with the haircut in the front. And that's pretty much the last part of this haircut as far as layering goes. And then I'm going to go into a technique for you guys, which is done with dry cutting. So in this situation, at this side here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this hair vertically from this side section, making sure that I'm going all the way down to the bottom hairline. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that up to our guideline, which we initially made up top when we did the center guideline through our back. We're going to take that looking for our guideline, making sure that when we go to cut our angle, that this area here is not going to get cut. So again, very important in a long layered haircut or concave layered haircut or whatever it is that you're cutting. When you have a woman with long hair or a man, you never want to cut your perimeter that you've already cut. So when I go to make my new guideline here, I'm going to angle upward, find where I have my longest length, and push my scissors through to it to assure that that length comes all the way back down to where we originally had it. Now, each and every section from this point is going to be dragged forward to that layer. So I'm going to now drag, sort of like what we did last week with the concave layers or the conversion layering. I'm sort of converging these layers towards the front, pulling them forward purposely, looking for my guideline, making sure that I'm not going to take the length off and then take the hair off. Let's just continue that on this side. Pulling that hair forward. Here it is. There's my guide. And as you could see by this haircut on the ends, it's not something that's a perfect line. A lot of times students try to make perfect lines. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of strands of hair on a head. And every time it moves with the wind or whether she shakes her head or not, it's going to be different. So there's no perfection in hair cutting. It's just a matter of making it a shape or just making it a round or similar to both sides. So that's it. That's one side. So you could see they blend together. They create the layers that I want, shorter to longer. That's how we know that they are increased layers, long layers, concave layers. They have 1,000 names. Don't get tied up on the terminology. But the idea of how you design them, like I was showing you on the board, that's the whole key to good haircutting, is to create the shape that you want in the haircut. And this was all thought out prior to. And I know for you young hairdressers that this is a difficult thing to figure out. But believe me, if you apply yourself like I did many, many moons ago, you'll figure it out. You just take the stuff you learned in the freshman room. If you've learned in the freshman room yet. I know I might have some youngins that just started school one day and haven't gone through this. But the idea of, making this happen during the consultation is a key factor, and just stick to your basics. And now I'm showing you on video how I can take these basics and make it into a modern cut. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to take that, again, that guideline, which I have at the top here, and we're going to make sure at the front here, staying just right at the front hairline, and I'm going to angle upward and always make sure that some of this bit is not going to get cut off. So one more time, up. Look for my initial guide. Here we go. There's the end where I'm going to cut to, and always make sure you maintain the length. Going to take the next section down vertically. Pushing this hair forward. Notice my body position now switched back. And the reason why I'm standing behind her and then the other side I was standing in front of her is because it would be near impossible for me to come up here and try and create that angled look coming this way as a right-hander. So as you could see, by standing behind her, body position, super important in hair cutting, making sure you are comfortable because you're going to be there a long, long time. Again, looking for that guideline, pushing those scissors through. Taking that last section on the side, pushing it forward, pushing it forward. Looking for that guideline. And making sure it comes off. Just coming into my back a little to see if anything else reaches that guideline. Get out of there. And looks like we have some length that needs to come off back here. There it is. Again, all the way up to that front hairline. And since something reached from there, I'm going to do it one more time until nothing else comes up to my guide. Oh, just a few strands there. So right now would be a good time if you have any questions about this haircut, because I am finishing up the wet section of the haircut, and I'm going to now be moving on to a dried mannequin that I have for you so that you could see this haircut in the dried form that I did for you, so that you could I can show you the technique that I set out to show you today, and that is to take a bunch of the weight away from the bottom area of this mannequin, because of the way in which we created these layers, everything's heavy down here. So we're going to go in and do a dry technique for you. Wet, dry. This is the dried view of this particular haircut. It is done in a manner in which I needed it so that I can do the technique for you on the haircut that's going to take this design and actually create a much lighter design through the back area here. So I'm going to actually demonstrate, or I'm going to show you exactly what's going to be going on the board one more time to explain to you the technique that we're going to do on the dry hair, and then we're going to actually go in and do it for you on the dry mannequin. But we're going to do it a little more mild. We're going to take zigzags, and the zigzags, what the zigzags do versus the straight subsections is it blends the layers a little bit more. Either way, each of these haircut, as you bring them out and take that short area to long area, you could see what's going to happen. You're not changing the haircut length. The layers that you cut are staying the same length. But because we're taking vertical subsections and these zigzag sections horizontally, we're releasing weight, and what's going to be created is a much lighter, much airier layered haircut. If you want to think of this technique, they told us when they taught us this, think of a Christmas tree and the different branches that a Christmas tree has. And that's what we're trying to create in our layers through the back area of this haircut as well as the side area of the haircut. So that's going to release or loosen up these layers a lot through the back and release a lot of the weight that I've created by doing the increased layered haircut, which left all that weight down here. We're going to go in and take that out, but it is done on a dry technique. So when you talk about this technique, dry or wet, you really have to figure it what works best for you. So as you can see, we have these diagonal or zigzag type sections, and again, that's to help blend this technique together. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to lighten up the bottom part of this, and what determined the zigzag that I took, or how high the zigzag was, is really how much hair I saw down here. And I do not want to go too strong, but I don't want to go too short either. So here we go. The technique that we're going to show you is a vertical subsection. What we're going to do is we're going to take this out horizontally. We're going to take our scissors and we're going to just create a gnawing action through this area. And I see that the hair is already leaving my hand, so I know that I haven't affected the length, but I have made it lighter in that particular area. Now, how short do you go with the initial sections? That's up to you. But what determines how short you start or how close to the scalp you start really will depend on the individual's type of hair. Always make sure that the bottom falls out before taking your next section or before finishing up this haircut. You could be a lot more aggressive with this, or you could be a lot less aggressive. But as you could see, or maybe you can't, with the short bits in here, this is going to be able to create voluminous layers or textured layers much more than if we just left it the way it was. So I'm going to come to this side. We're going to do the same technique that we did on the other side. Just taking vertical sections here. I don't have to worry about taking them on the point of the triangles or anything like that. But what I do want to do is I want to keep an eye on how vertical or how short I'm starting and how much weight is falling out of my hands as I go. So you can see I'm just trying to keep balance in the weight of the haircut, not necessarily the length, because the length is not changing in any way. I am using a slowly opening and closing of the scissors. You know, it would be great to slide cut this out, but there's two reasons why I chose not to do slide cutting to create this look. One is that when you do slide cutting, and if this, you need to do it on wet hair, and when you do a slide cut and you're doing it on wet hair, it is very difficult to see how much hair you're taking out of that particular client. So that's one thing that I have to be concerned about. Two is when you do this type of work, I want to see what the results are as I'm doing it, because I don't want to just looks a little weightier here on this side, so I'm going to just take a little bit more. I want to see what's happening with the hair as it progresses, so that it's done in a manner that I don't wind up releasing too much hair. I'm glad that I'm having the opportunity to share these techniques with you guys. Again, they've all been bottled up in this bald head of mine, and I need to get them out before I wind up going and retiring somewhere. How's that? So I'm going to lower the mannequin down. Again, if I was in the salon, always using my hydraulic chair as if it was a tool of mine, making sure that it's I'm comfortable with my body position at all times, because the client's only there for a half an hour, an hour. I'm there for 8 to 10 hours. I need to be comfortable, and I need to have my back not killing me. You guys will get the idea when you get about my age. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just take this, and you could see I'm going to now just take a section, and you could see the lightness coming through the area of this bottom section. So it's okay if I pick up the top section with the bottom section, and again coming in with my scissors and not losing the length of this haircut. This length is going to stay. The original layers do stay. But what we're going to do is we're going to just keep taking short areas and opening and closing our scissors, creating those light areas. Last but not least, and the whole idea of this and what it creates for us, you'll see when we do a little bit of a blow dry on this. We're not going to totally wet her down, but we're definitely going to blow dry this out, because this was just blow dried straight for the design or for the technique that we're doing right now. Any questions, or we're good on this?
No, we're good.
Okay.
People saying hello, enjoying it.
Okay, but we're going to take that there. And I might as well do the other side as well. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to start right from the perimeter here in the back. Again, keeping it horizontal. Finishing up on this side. Just a small open and close motion. That's what I'm doing with my scissors. And that's it. So the haircut is completed. As you can see, I wanted a very heavy fringe. Now that's just so that I have a difference and create, it's my creation. So I wanted to have a heaviness towards the front of the design with a lot of lightness towards the bottom. And again, I think that we've achieved what we had set out to do, and that is that even though we have that heavy fringe, this hair will flow back for her, and we have a lot more lightness through our layers with that technique. I'm going to mist it down just a little bit. I'm going to take a big old round brush and just blow dry this real quick for you guys, and see what we get out of it, and then just put a little bit of product in there. And I hope you could see the haircut. It's like a razor cut, but it's not a razor cut. The technique is cool and fun. And it's different too, because you don't see a lot of, I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of people working with it, but you know, hey, I'm not been behind a chair for way too long now, and I hope I get from my staff who are working on clients out there, and they inspire me because they tell me about the things they're doing, and that's the fun part of this business.